In our previous lecture, we learned that not all plants are the same. We have angiosperms and we have gymnosperms. Some of the most important and some of the most abundant plants that we have are the angiosperms, that is the flower producing or seed producing plants. Recall from our previous lecture that these plants come in two different types. That is monocots, as you can see here in the picture on the right, on the left hand side, and dicots, the picture on the right hand side. So in today's lecture, we're going to be focusing on the major differences between these two different groups of plants. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, here's the slide from our previous lecture once again for you. Plants are either non-vascular or vascular. Vascular plants are of two types, that is seed-producing or non-seed-producing plants. Seed-producing plants are the plants that are more important in terms of agriculture, forestry, and economics. And we have two different groups of seed-producing plants. Uh, Gymnosperms, that is different conifers and cycads, and angiosperm, uh, that is monocots and dicots. So I have tried to repeat what we've studied so far, and I hope you now understand what this lecture is going to be about as far as the classification of plants is concerned. Okay, so when I say we're going to be talking about the differences between monocot and dicot plants, I'm also talking about plant anatomy, because all of these differences that we're going to be talking about include anatomical differences. So if you don't know what anatomy is, I had copied the definition of plant anatomy from our very first lecture of forest botany. I hope you remember what we were talking about in our first lecture. So, plant anatomy is the study of the shape, structure, and size of plants. So when I say that we're going to be studying the differences between monocots and dicots, we're going to be really studying the differences among the shapes, the structures, and the sizes of those plants. You probably also know that a typical plant consists of three major vegetative organs: roots, stem, and leaves. So if monocots and dicots are different, all these three parts are going to be different as well. But there are other parts of the plants as well. That is the reproductive parts that include flowers, seeds, and fruits. So when there are differences between monocots and dicots, these parts, that is flowers or the reproductive parts of those plants, will also be different. We are not going to be talking about the differences in the reproductive organs of monocots and dicots. This lecture is going to be entirely about the differences in the roots, stems, and leaves. I'll try to stay as brief as possible in order to make it more digestible for students who are hearing all these biological terminologies for the very first time. So don't worry, it's going to be a lot easier than you're expecting. So in this slide, I am showing some of the basic differences among monocots and dicots. For example, one of the major differences that I can think of is the difference in the presence of trichomes. So a lot of the dicots, they have trichomes present on their bodies, whereas monocots normally don't have any trichomes, and so is the case with cuticle. A lot of the dicots, they have cuticle present on them, whereas monocots don't have any cuticle. Hypodermis, how hypodermis is made in monocots and dicots. That also differs between the two different groups. The ground tissues, they're differentiated or undifferentiated. This is something that also differs among monocots and dicots. The number of vascular bundles. Monocots and dicots have a clear difference between the presence and the number of vascular bundles. For example, monocots have 2 to 8 vascular bundles, whereas monocots normally have numerous vascular bundles, and the way they are arranged also differs, and the bundle cap, etc. So there are differences in as far as the vascular bundles are concerned. And so is the case with the nature of vascular bundle. There are differences on the basis of the nature of vascular bundles as well, and xylem vessels. If you don't know the details of these terminologies, I know they're really difficult and they're not easy to understand, especially if you don't have a background in biology. So please let me know, and I can provide you the definitions of all these terminologies, or simply you can look for them on the internet, and I'm sure you'll find something to make you understand what all these terminologies mean. Well, as we've been talking about how monocots and dicots differ, these differences start from day one. You can see plants when they germinate, they sometimes have one leaf or two leaves. If you see one leaf from a germinating seed, understand that this is a monocot, and that's what the name means, monocot, like one. And if you see that a germinating seed is having two leaves, that's an indication that it is going to be a dicot plant. There are other differences as well, as you can see in these two pictures. A monocot, the picture on the left hand side, have the veins arranged in straight lines. For example, in maize, which is a monocot. And when you compare this monocot leaf with a dicot leaf, which is on the right hand side of the slide, you see a leaf where you have veins that are arranged irregularly, and you see many veins that are clearly not in a straight line. For example, leaves that you see in a tomato plant. So now you know that there are differences as far as the leaves of monocots and dicots are concerned. When you dissect the leaves of the monocots and dicots, there are differences on the basis of the physiology of these two different leaves. For example, as you can see in these two pictures, the picture on the top, you see stomata at the bottom, right here. When you compare the stomata to the stomata in a monocot, you see that they differ. There are other differences between monocot and dicot leaves as well. For example, the vascular bundle in a dicot leaf is well defined, as you can see in the picture here. As you can see in the picture here, this is the vascular bundle of a dicot leaf. This is well defined as compared to the vascular bundle of a monocot leaf. And there are other differences as well. For example, the way these cells are arranged, and the types of cell present in each type, and so on and so forth. Likewise, monocots and dicots, they have differences as far as their stems are concerned. Clearly in this picture, as you can see, monocots have their vascular vessels arranged throughout the stem irregularly. Like you see one here, there's another one, and there's another one. This is only in this smaller section of the stem. You may be having more of these xylem vessels elsewhere in the stem. Whereas when you look at a dicot stem, you see the vascular bundle or your xylem and vessel, the xylem and phloem vessels arranged in a regular circular fashion, as you can see in the picture on the right hand side. So now you also know that monocots and dicots have more differences as far as their stems are concerned. So this is it for this lecture. Thank you very much. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments.